Next, we talk with Richard Mark, the president and CEO of Ameren, Illinois. Mr. Mark goes over the details of the so-called smart grid and what advances it will bring to the energy sector. He also comments on the effect a reduction of coal production will have on energy prices and the many well-paying careers one can find in the energy field. This runs about 1 hour.
Richard Mark, thanks for joining us again on the Illinois Channel.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Often the thing that all of us take for granted is our electricity, I think,
Right.
and it just always seems to be there, and we're always thankful for it, especially on these hot summer days when the air conditioner is rolling.
That's right.
But there's so much involved in making sure that it's there, and I think it's a fascinating story and also an evolving one, so we appreciate you taking the time to let us catch up on what's happening in the field of both electric generation and electric distribution and how it gets from point A to point B so that we have our lights burning.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
You know, one of the things, let me start off first, that I know I've heard of, and I imagine a number of people have heard of, is we hear about the smart grid. That's one of the developments that's coming along. What is the smart grid, and why do we need to change what we have?
Yeah, well, that's a good question, Terry. I'm glad you brought it up. You know, we do a lot of surveys and a lot of trying to focus groups with our customers, and surprisingly, the last survey that we've done on our customers said that most customers do not realize what smart grid is, and even in the industry it takes on different meanings. But really to us, the smart grid is trying to structure the energy infrastructure in our country, whether it's a distribution or transmission lines, electric or gas, and basically build it to where we can be more on top and be proactive of anything that's going on in the system that's abnormal. So, for example, we put in a lot of automated switching is one of our goals. That way, if there is a fault or a problem on the line, we get an advance notice of it. That fault can then be corrected by switching the electric in a different direction. We can get people out and get it repaired, and the customers really don't even realize there's been a problem. We use infrared sensors to detect any abnormalities on the line, and it can be repaired and replaced before the customer has an outage. So to us, the smart grid is really being able to give us as much information about how the transmission and distribution system's working to make sure it's more dependable and reliable. For many customers, they see it as just the new automated meters, and the new meters that's on their house. That's the thing that customers really look at as part of the electric grid, and they want to know what that can do. The new meters that we're installing send signals back to us that we can read the meter. We no longer have to we'll have to send a meter reader out to take a manual read. Those readings and the electric use of that house can be transmitted to us via collectors and systems on our infrastructure. And the new ones will be able to send messages back and give information to our customers about the usage. We can tell a customer what pricing signals will be, how much they're using, how much their past usage was, to help customers better control. We just started that program about a month ago, and within the next 3 to 5 years, we'll be installing about 780,000 of those smart meters on our system. So all of those things together are part of the new smart grid that's being put in place. And the whole smart grid will help customers manage their energy usage better. It will help give us more information so that we can be proactive to make that energy that the customers need more dependable, more reliable.
I have a phone here, and I can go into the settings and see how much bandwidth I've used for the month. Would that be analogous to say, here's how much electricity you've used for the month? Maybe you're up to $80 in electrical use?
Well, exactly. That'll be part of it. And the other part, we'll be able to even send you a signal or a text or an app on your cell phone that lets you know what your usage is. We may be able to we could even send you signals to tell what the price of electric is going to be tomorrow morning. And so you can adjust your usage and adjust your lifestyle patterns to basically manage the cost and how much energy you're using better.
I think it's funny. I mean, people don't think that we talk about the smart grid, but we don't use the term the dumb grid or whatever,
Right.
but without these devices and what we have had heretofore, as I understand it, when a power goes out, maybe a limb falls on a line or something,
Right.
that you wouldn't have necessarily known where the power is out. You have to wait for people to call and tell you. Is that right?
Right, yeah, in
So,
part.
so you're kind of operating blind, and then this way you're going to have, in essence, sensors all over. Well, you'll much better be able to manage what you have, knowing where the problems are.
Right. And right now, when you have an outage, you know the basic area where it's out. And then you send a crew out, and they visually inspect the line. And then they find out where the limb may have fallen or a pole broke, and then they can make the repair. With a smart grid, the system automatically will send a message to the dispatch center and tell them, here's where the problem is. And so instead of sending someone out to look for the problem, you're sending a crew out to repair the problem, which really speeds up the estimated restoration time, improves the amount of the time that the customer's actually out.
You know, I want to remind people, too, with electric deregulation that we had in Illinois several years ago,
Right.
Ameren no longer, of Illinois at least, is no longer in the power generation business. You're in
Correct.
the transmission business.
Right.
And I often tell people it's as if you're running a toll road, so to speak. You get paid for moving the electricity from point A to point B.
Right. That's been a big change in the industry in the last few years, yes.
So that said, some of the, I have several questions. Also, just when we hear about, like the president had proposed recently to lower greenhouse gases by another 30%, which would impact coal-fired power plants. Now, you don't operate those, but would that have any impact on, were that to eventually go through, would that have an impact on the price that consumers pay for electricity?
Well, I think, yes. I mean, all changes in regulations and those types of things are going to impact price. The more it costs to put new equipment on the power plants, depending on how the energy is generated, whether it's through natural gas, coal, or nuclear, that all impacts the price of electric. At Ameren, Illinois, what we do is we buy our power from the Illinois Power Authority, and then we redistribute that power to our customers or to even third-party customers. We do not actually generate it. So we're basically a buyer of energy. And so we're going to be subject of those cost increases, and then those cost increases are passed on to the customers.
And another thing relative to, well, let me, before I go on a different topic,
Okay.
relative to the electric dereg, how would you assess it? I mean, it was initially passed in 97,
Right.
then we got to 2007, and despite the fact that there had been a 10-year period of building in it, there were problems associated with it, and changes were made. But now it's been about 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
How would you, what's your assessment of how it's going?
Well, I think that, it's gone fairly smoothly. I mean, once we got past those first few years in '07, and I think the problem then was really the market. The market prices of electric were at its all-time high. Unfortunately, when the freeze was ended in 2007, so customers really kind of got a sticker shock. And the prices have, and then in '09 and '10, is probably the lowest that they've been in a long time. And now we're starting to see prices go back up. The one thing that I think customers have to understand about a deregulated market like we have is that the cost of energy is really controlled by the market. It goes up and down on a daily basis.
That was what I was going to ask. What causes it to go up and down?
Right. Well,
Is it supply and demand like everything else, I guess?
It's supply and demand in part. We just saw this past winter when we had those extremely cold days, the price of natural gas went up. So therefore, the price of electric, and especially that electric that has been generated by power plants that use natural gas to generate the electric. So that drives up the electric price. So that has some input on it. But then a lot of it is just the market changes and also the regulations as the regulations come about, and they have to put different types of equipment on the power plants. That'll drive the prices up. So at different times, it's kind of like the analogy is like gasoline prices. It's not as volatile as gasoline, but the price of electric goes up and down on a 15-minute scale. And a lot of people don't realize this, but there are actually people that are on trading floors that Ameren has that are buying and selling electric every 15 minutes, just like on the stock market. And so just like on the stock market.
Are they buying futures or?
Well, they're buying actually.
Are they buying it right now on the spot
They're
market?
buying it on the spot market for tomorrow. So certain companies, certain communities, certain states need extra energy because their power plants may not be providing enough to meet their needs. So they're buying energy from other sources, and they buy and sell. And so, you know, when you're playing the stock market, you know, some days the market's up, and you're going to have high price. Some days the market's low. And that's the one thing that I think the deregulation has brought about that customers don't quite understand, especially because they're used to a regulated monopoly. Prices are very stable and fixed, and it's been that way, you know, for 100 years in Illinois. Now, in the last 4 years, it's changed dramatically, and you know, customers really have fully understood what's going on yet.
You know, one of the things I hope to achieve in this is just to give people a better understanding as we started off of how the system works and what we're talking. There's a phrase that I'd like people to understand, and how is the power generated? See, we were talking about natural gas. One of the key things I think for people to understand is the phrase base load. What is base load? Because I think people don't understand generally. I think sometimes they think we can store stuff up as we would in some other, you know, you're making widgets and you make a bunch and you have them sitting on the shelf. That's not the way it is with electricity, is it?
Right. Now, the electricity that people are using right now to power their TV sets it's actually being generated right now. And so, you know, there's really no mass means right now in the market to store electric for long periods of time.
So you can't inventory electricity and park it on the side.
Now, you have to have plants that are running right now to meet the needs of what you need today. And so and that's your base load. So you know how many customers you have, you know about what their need is, so that's your base, and then you add a certain percentage of extra that you need for, like on a day like this, maybe the temperature reaches 99. So that could be what's called a peak day. So you'll have a peak time or a time during the day when the electric use is at its 24-hour high. And usually that happens right around 6 o'clock in the evening when people start coming home from work, turn on their lights, they turn the air conditioner down a little bit to get it cooler. Everyone's coming in at one time, and people use more electric. And that's usually when you hit your peak load. So utility companies like Ameren have to plan for that. We have to make sure we have enough energy readily available. And so and then the companies who own the generation plants have to make sure that their plants are up and running to meet those peak needs.
Now let me go back relative to what's happening with coal and all the regulations being on coal and the coal-fired plants, because coal produces currently how much of our electric would you say?
In the state of Illinois, I believe it's right around 55% or so of coal, and it varies state to state. For Missouri, for example, probably coal provides about 80% of their energy needs. So each state has a different, what's called a portfolio of energy, and it's everything from renewable, wind and solar, to natural gas-fired plants, to coal plants, to nuclear plants.
And Ameren, by the way, doesn't cover the entire state. You go, what, about as far north as Peoria or so?
We go further than that, up around LaSalle, Illinois, just south of I-80 there, and we go all the way down to the southern tip of the state, to the Kentucky border, and then from east to west, from the Indiana border all the way over to the Iowa border. We cover about 3/4 of the state geographically.
The landmass of the state.
Right.
So when coal, you say 55% in the state of Illinois, coal produces 55% of the electricity, let's say. Is that for Ameren, or is that the Illinois as a whole?
That's just statewide. Yeah, we do not buy the energy ourselves. We buy it through a state agency. And that state agency has a portfolio mix. So they try to go out and they try to buy a certain percentage of renewable, they buy a certain percentage of coal. They base it on market pricing. They buy a certain percentage of nuclear. Obviously,
And Illinois is one of the bigger nuclear
Yeah,
power.
Illinois is one of the states that has a number of nuclear power plants. And so that makes up a significant part of the portfolio in Illinois also.
What will happen, if anything, to the reliability of electricity being there, to the price, if we have a number of coal plants being shut down because the cost of new regulations makes them no longer economically feasible to operate?
Yeah, you know, that's something that people are really trying to get a handle on. It really depends on how the legislation, how fast the legislation is going to force some of those power plants to make that decision whether they're going to continue to operate or they're going to shut down. Realistically, you know, you can't shut down every coal-fired plant in the United States overnight. It's going to take a number of years.
We would
many,
be
many
literally
years.
back in the dark ages.
Exactly. You can, and it will not maintain the grid. You have to have a certain amount of generation going on throughout the entire electric infrastructure to keep it balanced. So if you don't have enough in one area and you have too much in another area, it throws the entire state infrastructure out of sync, and that could cause reliability problems. And so, you know, I think it's got to be something that our policymakers have to really look at carefully to make sure there is going to be enough generation out there to cover the base load, the needs of the average population of the state of Illinois, and that we embark upon trying to have a more a portfolio of different types of generation. We do it in a smart manner. If we don't, then there could be problems. But I think that it really is going to take people from regulatory agencies like the EPA, Congress, and the Senate to really sit down and think about how do you do this in a smart manner. And especially in a state like Illinois, where you have a number of coal mines in southern Illinois. You know, coal mines are a big business. There's a lot of coal in Illinois. You know, to just say that coal should not be a part of the discussion in the future, I think is unrealistic.
Well, and that's, you know, I like to say we don't take at the Illinois Channel any position on what's right or wrong on something, but what we do take a position on is that people ought to be informed.
Right, right.
And that's why we appreciate you taking the time. This is exactly what we want to do, is kind of say, what are the facts of running something as complex as our electric grid, which we all not only want for our comfort, but obviously in hospitals and the whole industry, we need to make sure we don't mess that up.
Right.
To what, I know you never want to speak badly of any people in the Congress or the legislature, but to what extent, when you talk about your issues with lawmakers, do you think people, and it's going to vary, I know, but to what extent do you have to educate them? To what extent do people in public policy positions, whether elected office or appointed office, have that background of exactly what we're talking about, just so that they can make sure that when they propose some policies that it's not going to throw a monkey wrench into the gears?
Yeah, well, it varies dramatically. I mean, it's from one end of the spectrum to the other. You know, some people are very, very knowledgeable of the electric system, the grid, the infrastructure, how it works, how generation works, the importance of balancing that generation, and some policymakers or elected officials just really have no real knowledge of it. And it is, as you said, very, very complicated science and technology that it takes to really make this entire system work. And you really can't look at it, you know, one state on an individual basis. You try to look at the infrastructure as being a mesh that's overlaid over the entire United States. And so how do you make that work? In some areas, renewable energy is very, very practical. Wind energy is very practical. In another state, for example, it may not be very practical at all. So you can't really just say, oh, let's all do wind energy, you know, because you have to look at where it is geographically. So when you are talking about these issues, you really have to know your audience, try to break it down into terms that people can understand. Because a lot of times if you get too technical into the engineering side of
Right.
how does the electric get from, maybe from Chicago to Kentucky, people kind of glaze over, and they just kind of like, oh, yeah, really?
Well, that's why I used the analogy of a
yeah.
toll road when we were saying kind of that, I mean, that people can get that concept. You're
Right.
paid to move things along, and,
Yeah.
as we say, the toll road doesn't care where you're going, just if you pay the toll.
Yeah, just launch, and how do you get it there? And sometimes, with a toll road, sometimes you have to take the road around obstacles, and sometimes on an electric grid, you get those same types of obstacles. And how do you get the electric from one place to the other? And that's what the transmission line does. And so, for example, our Ameren transmission company is looking at right now building a transmission line across the state of Illinois. And the reason for that is that there's a lot of renewable energy that is built in the West right now. And
All these wind farms that
the
we'll
wind
see.
farms in Kansas, Colorado, those areas. How do you get that energy to the eastern part of the state? And if you don't have that transmission line, you can't get it there. So what Ameren Illinois Transmission Company is trying to do is build that toll road across the state of Illinois. It's called a transmission line. And that way we'll be able to get wind energy, that's coming from the western parts of the United States across the state of Illinois into the eastern parts of the United States.
There's been a big movement, as I think most people know, to incorporate what we call renewable energy.
Right.
Typically, that means wind and solar. But speaking of confusion, I think people are confused as far as what's doable.
Right.
And going back to coal, I think some people would like to see every coal plant shut down and replace it with solar panels and wind farms.
Right.
Is that doable?
I don't believe so. The solar panels are a great supplement to the electric distribution system. Wind is a great supplement, but it's not going to be there all the time. It's not going to provide, as you mentioned earlier, that base load generation.
And where it has to be there, it
has
has to
to
be
be.
reliable day and night.
Exactly.
And obviously solar panels are not going to be operating at night.
Right. Well, it's not going to operate 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. They're not going to have enough of energy that they need to power all the energy needs of their house, let alone all the energy needs of a state. So you've got to have other sources of generation to supplement. And so, it's great to have a good portfolio of renewable energy and have solar panels there. It helps with the environment. It helps, manage energy costs. The turbines do. But at the same time, it's not something that's going to be able to provide the basic needs to power the entire state of Illinois or our entire country.
And speaking of cost and controlling costs so that the customers aren't priced out of being able to have their air conditioner on,
Right.
coal is much cheaper than renewables as far as the price paid per kilowatt hour. Is that correct?
Correct.
I think I've heard different figures, but coal is maybe somewhere in the area of 4 cents a kilowatt hour, where renewables might be as much as 22 cents a kilowatt.
Right. Last I've checked, it was something like that. Yeah.
I mean, just so people know what
Yeah.
apples and oranges.
Yeah, the Department of Energy has a great website, and I don't know it off the top of my head, but I'd be more than happy to get it for you, that I actually did myself. And it's a calculator that if you wanted to put solar panels on your house, and you can basically go in there, put some personal information about your home, where you live, and you plug in this information, and it'll do a calculation for you, and it'll take into consideration any rebates that are available for solar panels, and it will calculate how much it would cost to put a solar installation on your home, how much energy it would generate, and what your payback period would be, how long it would take you to recover. And it's amazing but really I think every person really ought to sit down and do those calculations and say, Illinois has some of the lowest electric rates in the United States right
Well,
now.
I was going to ask.
We're very, very close to being in, well, we're
Do you know how we compare off the top of your head? I mean, to different states?
we're in the lower 20%. We're, most states are considerably higher than us. So we're in the bottom, probably 20% of the states in the country for energy cost.
What accounts for that?
A lot of it is being centrally located. A lot of it is the mix of coal that we have, the generation of coal, and I think nuclear plants that have kept the cost down fairly low. And in other states they have a lot different mix. They use a lot more in the West Coast, renewable energy, for example, gas-fired plants. Transmission costs are more expensive. A lot of the other regulations maybe are more expensive, but a lot of things goes into the total cost. But Illinois ranks in the bottom 20%, or should I say in the top 20% as being one of the lowest costs of electric in the United States. And I think it's a sign that the state has managed the energy policies fairly well. We've taken really good steps to try to keep the energy costs low for our customers. And if you look around to other states, it's extremely good value that customers get for their costs that they pay for energy in Illinois.
And if you're trying to attract businesses to Illinois, we often hear what's wrong with Illinois, but I
Right.
mean, that's a big plus if you can save, if you're a company, save $5,000 or $10,000 a month on your electric bill.
Well, it definitely is. If you you think about it, if you're paying 4 cents a kilowatt hour in Illinois, and the state next to you is paying 8, 12, 15, 20%. Some of the East Coast and West Coast states, the cost there is 25, 30 cents a kilowatt hour.
That's amazing.
Compared to 4 cents in Illinois. So,
And if you're a retiree, not even a car plant,
That's right.
I mean, that means
That's
you're
right.
paying maybe, I don't know, $80 a month for electricity instead of
Right.
$300.
well, we have 1.2 million electric customers in Illinois. The average electric bill is about $108. On average for a typical customer. Typical customer uses about 10,000 kilowatt hours a year. And so, the average bill is about $108. That's a great value when you look at other states. But when you try to talk to people, they say, I don't care what other states are paying. And that's a point, you're right. But on the other hand, what it costs to make the electric and to generate electric is very similar across the board. You may have more regulations, other states put on more after cost of the basic generation piece of it, which drives cost up. But Illinois has a great value that I don't think the residents of Illinois fully realize or appreciate. And for a business that's looking at moving in, especially a manufacturing business, there's a great opportunity for considerable savings. And we are also probably in the top 25% as far as reliability. The state of Illinois has great reliability, so it's a good place that not only for residential customers have value, but also for manufacturers.
Let's talk a little bit. I want to go through a series of issues relative to transmission.
Okay.
The electric grid, we might say, is the electric highway, the distribution side, just like our auto. So just as we have to rebuild our roads, for obvious reasons, they begin to crumble. How long, when you put transmission lines up, do they last, and to what extent do you have to anticipate that,
Right.
just like a road breaking down, they're going to only have a certain lifespan?
Right, yeah, and then there's a lot of factors that go into that.
Can I throw something else in there?
Sure.
To incorporate maybe in your answer? I don't know. Are there any new developments? Are we still using copper wire to distribute, or are there new things in the works that are going to distribute the power more efficiently than what we've done over the last 50 years?
Yeah, well, we don't use as much copper wire. Most of the cable now is aluminum. And we still use some copper in certain places. But the biggest changes, I think, is the structures that they're built on. We use a lot more different types of structures, even on our distribution side. Sometimes the poles, people are used to seeing the traditional wooden utility pole. In some areas, we're moving more toward a composite pole. They're more sturdy. They can withstand higher wind gust. So we're using different types of poles. On the transmission side, we're using more steel structures, larger structures to withstand the winds and weather. And then there's a lot of systems and things that are going on the poles that also, like we talked about with the smart grid, that gives you a lot more information about what's going on. There's sensors that detect the bushings and on the connections that actually that detect if there's excessive heat building up, because if there's excessive heat that is building up on a bushing or a connector, that indicates that there may be some type of loose wire there, that if it goes unrepaired, it will cause an outage. And so all that type of information goes into a central collection center, and it's analyzed on a regular basis, and then crews are sent out on a regular basis to make those repairs. Also, I think the average customer will see more tree trimming. Tree trimming is a major factor as far as the reliability of a transmission distribution system. Because of some of the outages that occurred in the New England area several years ago that were caused by trees, what the federal government has mandated that utility companies now expand the width of the transmission lines, the right-of-way, and so we have to pretty much clear cut everything around the major transmission lines. Around distribution, we don't have to cut back as far, but we are doing more cutting back and not allowing trees or any type of vegetation that can grow into that line, which can cause a major outage.
How
And
long
so,
do the lines last when you put them up?
the average line will last like 40 to 50 years, depending on the environment. And that means water, weather, rain, snow, ice, that type of thing.
Is it kind of on a rotating basis, or are we going to have like a huge, retrofit we have to do in 50 years?
Right.
I mean,
Well, so we're actually starting some of that retrofitting now. The last major build out, if you think about our country and some of the major things that have happened, the last major build out of the electric infrastructure was in the 60s and 70s. When everyone started getting central air conditioners, when everyone started getting more TVs. If you think about in the 70s, the average house had one TV. And no central air. Now they have 5 TVs and usually 2 central air units sometimes, And so everyone
not
started,
to mention computers.
and
right?
computers and all the other things that are rechargeable.
And DVRs, which are constantly on.
That's right. And so the system is really built up to, and so the system right now is about 45 to 50 years old, and so you basically start getting into replacing it. And we don't go out and just replace everything at once because of its age, because some things may be 50 years old and it works perfectly fine. Another area may have a line because of that area is subject to more ice, hail, wind, those types of things. It may be 25 years old and it needs to be replaced. So we have a very complicated and systematic asset management program that we do regular inspections of our lines, of our entire infrastructure. Sometimes you might see a guy in your neighborhood go up to a utility pole and dig out around it, the utility pole, and maybe make a drill a hole into the pole and just standing there doing some things around with the pole. Well, he's really inspecting that pole. He's inspecting the integrity of that pole to see if it needs to be replaced or not. And we do that on a rotating basis. We have over 50,000 miles of transmission and distribution lines in the state of Illinois. And we regularly inspect that to make sure that it's able and it's going to be there and provide the energy that you need when you turn your TV set on.
One of the problems that all of us are becoming increasingly aware of too is as we've had the internet develop, we have security issues that we never had
Right.
before.
That's right.
As we talk about the smart grid, and then that's going to be computerized, it has to be a concern that the grid would be subject to being hacked, one.
Right.
to what extent within the industry, not just Ameren, but nationwide, is security of the grid being considered? And is it a real consideration, or steps being taken so that we as consumers know, even if we don't know specifically what you're doing, that security is going to be a real concern and steps are being taken so our grid isn't shut down by some foreign power?
Right. Cyber security as well as physical security is a top priority of the utility business right now. You know, we're looking at, you know, security on all aspects of the infrastructure. And, you know, it's a lot of it is exposed. There's not some type parts of the system are out in rural areas. So, you know, we have to look at innovative ways of how to really protect that infrastructure. And so when we look at automating the infrastructure, there's a lot of work that goes into every piece of equipment that is put on that structure is tested to make sure that it isn't as easily accessible to cybersecurity. I don't want to say that it never will be, because, you know, as you know, in the world of internet, and they develop something new every day, and so it's you always have to be very, very vigilant about protecting any piece of equipment you put on the system so that it cannot be hacked. And then on the physical security, we have to also be very, very careful of where we install our substations, looking at some of the bigger pieces of equipment that are on our system, and making sure that it can also be protective. And we take the industry is taking a number of steps to make sure that we standardize that throughout the country. We protect our infrastructure assets. And the one thing that the general population can really help with is that the substations they see, you know, those are vital to their everyday quality of life. And so if they see someone out there, you know, that is suspicious around the pole, around the substation, around any equipment, call the police and report it, and have someone can come and check it out. Because, you know, you never know what someone might be doing. It's dangerous, for one thing, to play around any type of electrical or gas equipment out in the field. It's dangerous. You should stay away from it. And if someone is trying to do something, you know, we ask all the public to report any suspicions out there and to help us out, because it is something that's important to our country. It's important to each and every person in the United States who uses electric and gas.
You know, another thing that I think is interesting that happens on a nationwide basis, as I understand it, is just when you look at the storms, this horrible winter we've had last winter, and obviously other areas of the country have hurricanes come through or tornadoes. The cooperation that exists between different power companies, so that not each one has to have an army of linemen. I mean, I guess you kind of do for your own needs, but that you send them out to help where the power lines are down, and then they send them in if we need help, I guess. But it's amazing. Can you tell us, just when you think of all these people coming in, and maybe they come in from Oklahoma or wherever, they have to be housed and fed. That alone is talk about managing. That's something I think none of us think about, but we're happy that the power gets back up after 3 days or something. Just give us an inkling of what is involved when a storm, you know, a storm's coming in. Are you like putting everyone on alert? Are you calling different states to see who's available just in case, or how does that work?
All of those things. It's like a military operation. We have an emergency operations system that's in place, and then the agreements where companies help each other, as you mentioned, is called a mutual assistance agreement. And so all the utilities have a mutual assistance agreement, and so if their storm is rolling in, you'll have a phone conference, and you know, you can ask other companies to provide help, and then they'll agree to send some people in. We actually just sent some linemen last week to northern Indiana to help out with some storm damage over there. So we help them, they help us. But you know, if you think about it, when there's a really, really severe storm and we bring people in from as far away as, we've brought people in from Kansas, Texas, you know, the Colorado, all over the country. If you have a really big storm, people come in from all over, and And then our job is to make the arrangements for them. So you're making the arrangements for those people to be here anywhere from 3 to 10 days, depending on the number of outages and the severity of the damage. And that means for that 3 to 10 days, you provide everything that they need to exist. Everything from basic hygiene things, a place to stay, 3 meals a day, food, water, everything. And in fact, we've even in one storm brought in portable laundromats where we could actually help with the linemen that were from out of town do their laundry right there on site. So you bring in all these services, you have to put the people up, you take care of them, and then you send them back. And so it's a major undertaking.
I mean, it's a fascinating business in that way because it's so unusual.
It
I
is.
can't think of another business that does this.
It is. It's really interesting. And we have some people on staff that have helped us. We have some former military and actually some people that are currently in the military that really work at logistics that have been really helpful in trying to think about how do you move hundreds of people and thousands of tons of equipment and redeploy them across the entire state or across an entire region within a number of hours. We can't take 2 days. We can't take 2 days to get a crew there because the viewers they want their lights on as soon as possible. So we have to mobilize all of that, and it's done within a number of hours. And it's really it's an amazing undertaking. But we have hundreds of really dedicated people at Ameren, Illinois, and at public utilities throughout the country. That when there's a storm, these guys are packed, ready to go. Some of our linemen keep a bag that's packed all the time at home that has a duffel bag with 3 days worth of clothes and equipment in it. They run home, they can grab that bag, and within less than an hour, they're in their truck ready to head to help someone out that's their lights are out. So it's an amazing community of support within the utility companies that help each other. And many times we have people that's coming in helping from Oklahoma. Our customers often don't even know that these people have traveled here just to help get their lights back on.
Well, that's what I was saying, and no one's happy when they have to go for 4 or 5 days, but on the other hand, I mean, it's amazing that it happens as quickly when you think of the miles and miles and miles where it might be of damage, and some of these guys working out in bitterly cold conditions. It's something for, I think, to applaud them. Speaking of, there's a couple of things before we run out of time. One of the interesting developments I think we all would like to see is somewhat the development of the electric car, and I think we're getting closer and closer. It used to be an antiquity, going back 100 years ago, but now we have Tesla, and we'll see where that goes, and maybe some other people will get into that, and we have the hybrid. So we have the whole issue of putting charging stations up, and if we switch from gas to electric, even if that were to happen over a period of 20 years or 25 years, if we did that in mass, you just can't build the grid overnight. Can we, with the current grid that we have, handle that addition? And to what extent do not only Ameren, but again as a nation, do we have our grid industry in management looking down the road to say, what do we need to be doing in 2014 so that we can accommodate a lot more power in 2034?
Yeah. We actually have teams right now that are looking at what's the grid going to look like in 2030, 2040. So we're looking out that far to make sure that we have the infrastructure there to meet the needs of the public. And so that's something that we work on constantly. We do a regular review, annual review of the entire electric infrastructure, electric and gas infrastructure in Illinois. We go through our system to make sure we have enough capacity to meet the needs. As far as the electric car, right now our system can basically provide the needs or charging needs for what we see out there in the market. Now, that may change with the more and more inventions and improvements to the batteries that are in those cars. Right now, at Tesla, you have to charge it overnight. So you come home from work, you plug it in, you charge it. And so it's like an 8-hour charge or so. the infrastructure that we have across the country will support that. And then the other thing is, so if they have quick charging, is that going to have some changes? It may affect the system a little bit, but I think the basic infrastructure is there that will support electric cars in the United States. Some subdivisions, there may be pockets of areas that need to upgrade the transformers, and we monitor that. We look at like I said, we look at every system, and we know that if a system is growing and getting near its capacity, we'll put it on the schedule to make upgrades to the transformer, to the ability of that system to grow in the future. So we do that on an annual basis.
Are there different lines? Like, in other words, if you're in an area where there's a lot of electric usage, is the line literally thicker as compared to if you're just stringing a line down to one farmhouse a mile down the road?
There's some, it depends. There is some differences, but mostly it's the size of the transformers that are
the key thing.
Yeah, the transformers and the feeders that feed into that area really make the difference. It's
Just
not
kind of
so
a throwaway
much.
question.
Yeah,
It made me think.
That's a good question because people ask it all the time.
Well, something I did want to bring up, though, is on the other hand, talk about linemen and all that. You're a pretty big employer. You have people,
Right.
as you say, all across 3/4 of the state.
Right.
What kind of jobs are available, and what's happening in a lot of industries with the retirement of the baby boom generation
Right.
happening now? Everyone in every industry is going to be losing a lot of experience. To what extent are you trying to balance your work flow, your employees, to bring new people in now, and to what extent are people looking for jobs? Can they be employed, and how long does it take to be trained to do some of these positions?
Well, a lineman, it takes about 3 to 4 years to train a lineman. So we bring them in. We have a number of what we call apprentice classes that are going on right now. We try to do about 4 apprentice classes a year. Each class will have anywhere from 12 to 16 applicants or apprentice in the class. It takes, like I said, it takes 3 to 4 years to be a journeyman lineman. And so what we try to do is stay ahead of it and develop a pipeline. There are shortages of linemen across the United States, and so we find there are some schools that are springing up around the country that train linemen, which you don't really have to go to another school. A person that can go online and meet we have a test called a CAS test, and it's a test of basic abilities of math, decision making, problem solving type of tests. And people can really go on Ameren.com and look at careers, and they can take that test, and it's a sample test, and they can find out if they have the aptitude. But someone who's used to working outside, someone who has some mechanical ability and a high school diploma can sign up or apply to be a lineman. Then they go through a 3 to 4 year training program. It costs us about $250,000, $250,000 to $300,000 to train a lineman.
Wow.
And when they come out, it's a good paying job. Ameren, Illinois has great pay, great benefits. They all are members of the IBEW. We work really closely with the unions for training, not only on working on the lines, but also on basic safety. So they're all IBEW jobs. But it's a great career. There's opportunities out there, and there's some guys who don't work for just one utility. They work for a number of utilities. They travel all over the country, and work on transmission lines, work on new developments that are happening. But I think it's a great opportunity for a young person who likes being outdoors, likes working with their hands. And also, in Illinois, we have a large gas distribution system. We have 18,000 miles of gas distribution, about 800,000 natural gas customers. And that's another area where there's great jobs for men and women, both on the inside part of that business, working, everything from the planning, design, and construction of gas and natural gas lines, to the billing of customers, customer service, customer billing, all of those types of part, whether it's the call center, are working in one of our gas storage fields. So that's another area where there's a great jobs for young high school graduates, someone returning from the military, someone just graduating from community college. Great opportunities, great jobs in the utility field. We've hired about we've hired about 200 Ameren, Illinois new employees in the last 2 years, and about 200 new employees have come in from contractors that are not Ameren employees but are now working on our property. And that hiring is going to continue, especially in the area of linemen and gas workers in the next several years, both here in Ameren, Illinois, and other public utilities.
I was going to say, and I should have brought it up earlier, that you not only do electric, you also do natural gas.
We do natural gas.
What's your mix of, your business mix of gas customers to electric customers?
We have 1.2 million electric customers and 800,000 gas customers.
And given again that how do you grow? Your costs are going to go up, labor costs go up, any number of things go up over there. How do you grow your revenues when you are relatively, I guess you put on new customers hopefully, but
Right.
maybe not. Maybe if people, we often hear about people moving out of Illinois. I mean, you
Right.
could have your customer base go down. How do you grow your business? Let me just leave it there.
Yeah. Well, it is tough, especially in if you have an economy that's not growing, if you have population that's not growing. We still have commercial growth, manufacturing growth in Illinois. It's not what it was 5 years ago, but you do still see anywhere from 1 to 2% growth from our organic part of our business, from customers. You do see areas on the residential side continue to grow, new subdivisions, people are moving. A lot of time you see a redistribution of where your load is. You might have a urban area, for example, that traditionally has been a lot of customers there, a lot what we call load demand for energy, and that may move from that area more out to a suburban area, out to the outskirts of town. And so that's one of the challenges we have with growth, is expanding the infrastructure, but you may not be expanding the number of customers you have. You may be just redistributing those customers to a different area. So it is a challenge.
Is it possible you're going to become more of a natural gas company than an electric company?
I don't know. That's a challenge to look at the future, because natural gas, with the increase in fracking and natural gas resources in the United States, and especially in Illinois, there could be areas in Illinois that may be more accessible now and develop natural gas transmission there that maybe wasn't available 5 years ago. So if that becomes a realistic opportunity, then there may be an opportunity there for us to look at growing our gas customers. So we look at all of those, and we have a research and development team that studies those types of things, and we just try to stay ahead of what the customer needs are going to be, and also the customer expectations. 5 years ago, customers really didn't think a lot about if the lights just blinked momentarily. But now, because of so much of the households are automated, any type of disruption of service affects the customers. And so our challenge is to really meet those growing customer expectations. And to do that, we have to keep investing in the system, keep improving with the best technologies, staying abreast of what's out there and what is being developed to make that whole infrastructure, which is a very, very complex combination of power plants, wires, poles, gas lines all together. But how do we make it work so that when that customer comes home at night, wants to have dinner, they turn on the oven, it fires right up with natural gas, they turn on the light switch, the lights come on. They don't realize that there's thousands and thousands of people that are working that very minute to make sure that happens for them. And if there's anything that you would hope, I would hope that our customers recognize, is that it's a very, very complex system. And I think we're fortunate to be in Illinois and in the Midwest that we get great value for the price that we pay for our natural gas and electric services here in Illinois.
Well, Richard, Mark, we appreciate you taking the time to
Thank
discuss
you.
this with you, and good luck to all your crews. It's a fascinating business, and I'm sure you got more than your hands full with just trying to manage all the various aspects of it.
It's a challenging time, but as I tell our guys all the time, our employees out there in the field, you think about it, they're helping rebuild the infrastructure of the state of Illinois that their children's children will be using 50 years from now. And I think our employees take great pride in that, and I do too. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about it.
Thanks again.
Okay, thanks.
You're watching the Illinois Channel, an independent nonprofit corporation formed to provide gavel-to-gavel coverage of Illinois state government and other public affairs events taking place across Illinois.